Good evening, everybody. This is a live emergency briefing as we are talking about Tropical Storm Francine, soon to be Hurricane Francine. I'm working with some new annotation tools. Got a little mic as well, dominating with that. Hopefully it's not too loud. Let me know if it is too loud, of course. But there you can see the latest forecast model. This is the HWRF model, the 18Z. I'm waiting patiently for the 0Z models to come out, and once that happens, we'll have a better idea of what the structure is going to be. Also looking for forecast model trends as well. It looks to me like, based on the GFS ensemble, that some of the stronger solutions go a little bit further east, and I do think that the tropical storm is intensifying at a more rapid rate than what some of the other forecast models were showing. And right now it looks like it's going to bring the dirty side of the system right into Vermilion Bay. A couple of the models, though, are showing a little bit further east of a trend, and it also looks like we're going to have tornado potential, especially in these outer bands. So the 18Z HWRF model has a 966 millibar central pressure on approach here to the south central coastline of Louisiana. And watch these tornadoes get going, these tornadic supercells in the eastern outer bands. That's going to be out here, folks. These are all going to have the potential of producing tornadoes. That's the front right quadrant of this tropical cyclone. There's the center of it, making landfall as a Cat 2, maybe even a Cat 3 potentially, but it does start to experience just a little bit of wind shear coming in from the southwest, and that could consolidate some of the convection along the northern and northeastern quadrant. But a lot of the hurricane models are showing more of a vertically oriented system that definitely is responding to the ventilation just as early. And I'm looking at the high resolution models. I'm going to show you some radar as well, as it looks like there is a little bit more convection starting to reinvigorate near the inner core of Francine, as it's just off to the southwest of Brownsville. But here is the HAFSB parent model. And this is the 18Z run, and this is the one that's a little bit further east. Notice how it definitely is further east on the envelope, a lot further east, eastern side of the National Hurricane Center envelope as well. But this is the HAFSB parent model, and you can see that it's a little bit further east. Let me zoom in on this as well. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We got a convective burst that is happening right near the southwest side of Tropical Storm Francine. Here's the 18Z HAFSB model, and this is the further east outlier, and it is a little bit weaker than some of the other high-resolution hurricane models, but this would bring the dangerous side of that hurricane, the especially dangerous side, into the Grand Isle area. You really want to look where you get that onshore flow right on the eastern edge of the hurricane, right where that flow is going to be parallel to the coastline. This would bring this whole portion of the coastline more toward offshore flow. However, the hurricane warning does include the Sabine River Valley, and that's because just passing just offshore, that could bring some hurricane conditions inland a little bit. And also there still is some forecast uncertainty. Some of those forecast models are a little bit further west, of course. And so I'm using some of these newer tools, doing a quick live YouTube update. Hopefully some of those updates were sent out. If my computer gets a little overloaded, you'll know, because there's going to be kind of a big lag that's happening. But let's take a look at some of the higher resolution models. The HAFSB model, this one's a little bit closer to the HWRF. And let me use a little smaller unit here. And this has a 967 millibar central pressure. And you've got Cypremort Point right out here. This is Pecan Island. And all of this is likely going to be underwater with that 5 to 10 foot storm surge coming in. You basically have a levee that runs across southern Louisiana. And anywhere to the south of that, you have mandatory evacuations. That's probably going to be underwater with a 5 to 10 foot storm surge. But you can see that this is a little bit further west. The HAFSB model compared to the HAFSA model, that would have brought that dangerous storm surge a little bit further east. But even with this further west track, you'll still have that onshore flow, and that'll bring probably a 4, 5, 6 foot storm surge, even in locations a little bit further east. But this, notice how Vermilion Bay is just shaped like a half moon. So any of that onshore flow that's coming in, that is just going to be pumping right into this bay. And look at the wind direction there. the wind direction right into this bay. You're going to have a 5 to 10, maybe even a 12-foot storm surge right along the periphery of that bay. Again, with this offshore flow in Cameron Parish, that would be a good thing with this further east track, because that would be less storm surge for these areas that were just racked by Hurricane Laura back in the day. And near Lake Charles, they just took down that massive bank tower. You had a lot of broken glass. Broken glass was raining down on some storm chasers out there during Hurricane Laura, and that has been imploded. That tower just came down. But there you can see the HAFSB model. I'm going to have to shut this thing down. We're getting a little bit of a lag. We're shutting down the Epic Pen. I think I just have too much stuff running on this laptop. So we shut down the Epic Pen. That seems to have improved this just a little bit. And now let's pivot back over to radar. One of the keys here, Meteorology 101, is to kind of compare what some of these high resolution models are initialized like. And we have a 993 millibar central pressure with this tropical cyclone. So it does appear to be intensifying at a much faster rate than some of the forecast models were showing. And you can also see some vigorous convection that's starting to develop right on this. This is the inner core of Tropical Storm Francine. And looking at satellite, we do have some more vigorous convection developing right in the southwestern quadrant. Some tropical storm conditions are starting to come on shore here near Mexico with these squalls migrating onshore, even some supercell storms, it looks like, based on Brownsville radar. We've had some lightning as well, but not as much in the way of tornado warnings just yet. But this should stay off Brownsville, but we do have some squalls that have been coming on shore, a little bit of lightning as well. But this is wrapping in some dry air. Tropical Storm Francine is pulling in this dry air right off the Mexico plateau, wrapping into the circulation just a little bit, and that's leveled off the intensification trend that was happening earlier this evening. But we're going to take a look at the near-term forecast structurally too. So first, let's look at satellite imagery. Thanks everybody for tuning in to this nightcap session here, getting ready to chase a Hurricane Francine. And right now I'm definitely looking for areas to intercept this. I've been doing a lot of research around Vermilion Bay, looking for those stilt homes, of course, to chase the Francine. The problem is when you get in those stilt homes, you can definitely have some issues with losing your vehicle, potentially even swamping your vehicle out there. And here's the latest satellite imagery, and I want to show you this convective burst that's happening along the southwest periphery right now of this tropical cyclone. And you can see that convective burst right on the southwest side of that inner core. Right there, you can see that little hot tower right in the center. You could definitely see and we'll call them hot towers, but they have cold cloud tops, so that's how the infrared is able to look at it. But we definitely do have that dry air that's wrapping into the center of this circulation. But this is probably the beginning of the overnight intensification trend that you can see right on the southwestern side of that inner core. Starting to wrap in a little bit. This is interesting. This is the GFS ensemble. And to me, it looks like it actually shows some of those stronger systems right on the eastern edge of that envelope. I'm going to head over, make sure we still are live even. Hopefully there's not too much of a lag. I don't know why this thing lags, but I think that it is. Yeah, I have no idea. Probably need to just shut down radar scope here. We just looked at the radar. We saw some of those towers there on the western edge of the circulation. And let me show you some of the latest too on the hurricane models, the 0Z hurricane models coming in. And there you can see a cluster right down the heart of Vermilion Bay. Let me get my new Epic Pen out. Thanks everybody. Please dominate that like button. And also let me know if the mic is not working. So I've cranked up the gain. I've got my mic right here on my hat, as you can see. And let me circle this. Got my new pen out. And you can see a lot of those tracks right down Vermilion Bay. That's Vermilion Bay. Let me see if that is circling the right spot on my map. Gotta be kidding me. There it is. There is the pen. And you can definitely see a lot of those clusters right down the heart of Vermilion Bay. See if I can even make that a little bit bigger so that you can see it. And then this is going to go inland too. During the day on Thursday, that could bring a tornado threat up through the Memphis area, possibly even western Kentucky during the day on Thursday. Different than Debbie, this is going to be accelerating as it approaches and makes landfall. And that's because you have an upper level trough that's coming out of Texas. That's going to bend the wind to the north of it, but then you also have a high pressure dominating down here in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's going to try to bend the winds with an anticyclonic curvature to the south of it, and that creates ventilation in between those two features, and that's why we're getting a stronger hurricane right now. The models have been trending up dramatically, and we do think that trend's going to continue, probably a Category 2, maybe even a Category 3 at landfall. Definitely stronger than a barrel, and there are still some model discrepancies. Some of the high-resolution models, like the HAFS-A model, that comes out a little bit closer to Grand Island. The HWRF model, HAFS-B, all agree, though, with this track a little bit up Vermilion Bay. And this northeastern turn is all definitely because of that upper-level trough that begins to interact, and only about -7 to -8 degrees Celsius temperatures near the core of that mid-latitude trough. But those are the 0Z models so far. And we can take a look at some of the Hurricane Hunter data. We're looking at Tropical Tidbits here. Great website for tracking these. And it is in the storm right now and still has that 993, 994 millibar center. But look at that convective burst that's happening right here. Looks like you have some stronger northwesterly winds in concert with that convective burst, but the strongest winds sampled are here in the northeastern quadrant, 45 to 50 knot flight level winds, and still that 993 central pressure, maybe 994 through the second pass, but basically holding steady. We definitely have lost that earlier intensification trend. You can also see some of the convection here that's approaching the coastline of Mexico. So it appears to be holding steady, but it is forecast to maybe be a hurricane in the next couple of observations. I wouldn't be surprised. Advisories wouldn't be surprised if we wake up tomorrow morning and we have a hurricane. These are the 0Z hurricane intensity models, and you have a couple more of these up into the Category 2 area just yesterday or the day before when we were doing these updates. They were all showing tropical storm. Then they upticked to a hurricane. Category 1, now they're starting to nose up into the Category 2. No members up into Category 3 at least. And we are going to be going live on the ground, full-blown coverage. Here is the latest European model. Let me use both the pen and slide this a little bit off to the right. Hopefully the lags aren't too bad on this. I think that by shutting down the internet at least works a little bit better. But you can see the European model has definitely come in line with the GFS. Taking that track, 977 millibar central pressure. This is Wednesday evening, though, and this is the morning European model. So one update that we've had is that the models have gotten a lot faster with this lifting off to the northeast. A stronger, deeper system's going to feel those southwesterlies a little bit more, and that will accelerate it, move it a little bit faster. So here's the 18Z GFS, which will show you that faster storm motion. This is late morning on Wednesday, and you've got a 973 millibar ripper out there. Just a tire of a storm system. Let me change the color here. I'm going to change that to green. Oh, yeah. We're going to use a green coloration. There you can see a tire of a storm system. Just a barrel out there. Watch as it gets a little bit closer. Some of the forecast models do suggest that this thing weakens a little bit on approach, but it looks like Wednesday at midday, 972 millibar central pressure approaching the south central coastline, Louisiana. There's Vermilion Bay, Cypremort Point right about there. Pecan Island, southwest side, you got Cameron Parish over here, where we mounted the Windy Palms project. And boy, the European model holds this steady, coming right in, but look at it bring that dangerous portion of the storm a little bit further east. That's going to be possibly bringing some more dangerous conditions up near Grand Isle. So the European model, or excuse me, this is the GFS, shifting a little bit further east as well, taking it up the eastern edge of Vermilion Bay. Definitely a decent chance that we actually have to leave Cypremort Point and come all the way back around eventually. But that's the 18Z GFS. There's the trend from 12Z, which is further west, just on the west side of Vermilion Bay. That's 12Z. And then you head over to 18Z. And you do have that little shift. It'll be interesting to see if the 0Z is going to be consistent with that. Of course, you're not supposed to use the NAM model, but at least we have the 0Z models that are coming out. Accelerating it even further. So this is at 4 p.m. 21Z. The NAM is starting to accelerate a little faster as well. It's in agreement with the GFS, taking it right up the heart of Vermilion Bay, right up into that pocket, folks. Again, Vermilion Bay right here, 5 to 10 foot storm surge with a Category 2 like this. Category 2, maybe even a Category 3 potentially. And we definitely need to watch out for the tornado potential after this comes inland. I'm going to show you some of the high resolution models that will show you that. My buddy Brandon Kopic said to check out the 3-kilometer NAM, which of course is a convective allowing model. Will definitely struggle with the ocean interface. So you're not supposed to use convective allowing models like this, but it's got like a 956 central pressure, major hurricane. But I do think that it is useful at least to even look at the evolution of these bands. This is where we're going to have to watch out. These bands right here, supercell storms are going to be coming ashore, and this includes New Orleans, Houma, Baton Rouge, southeastern Louisiana. That's going to be your tornado potential as those come inland. And you can look at some of these traditional parameters too here. I have to scroll down and then back up. And you can see the strongest wind shear in that front right quadrant of the tropical cyclone there on the 3-kilometer NAM, a convective allowing model. But definitely is some tornado potential here. Look at that 330 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. And look at that hodograph. This probably isn't going to line up right, but you can see that curved hodograph. Let me make sure that's lined up. My new annotate tool, folks. We are definitely dominating with these annotate tools. There, so that's your sickle-shaped hodograph, and notice how it's in the front right quadrant. Or front right quadrant of the tropical cyclone, but you have a lot of easterlies in the front right quadrant, and that's why it's plotted in this quadrant of the hodograph. You've got those low-level easterly surface winds flipping over to southeasterly, and then a low-level jet even up at about 3 kilometers, up like 700 millibars, due south at like 60 knots. And then you start to feel those southwesterlies of the approaching trough, and that actually brings some of those wind barbs over this portion of the hodograph. So this is actually a more favorable tornadic hodograph than I've seen in a while, because it's actually interacting with that trough, and those 5-6 kilometer winds and up, shifting over to southwesterly. Those are in that portion. And look at the low-level shear from the 0 up to 1 kilometer layer. You're talking like 30 knots of 0 to 1 kilometer shear. Storm motion northwest at about 30 knots, and those are going to be capable of producing tornadoes, certainly, as they lift up into southeastern Louisiana. That includes New Orleans. My good buddy Devin Lucy's down there. Here's Lake Pontchartrain, and all these bright colors there, that's all extreme wind shear, storm relative helicity, and you've got these feeder bands of supercells that are going to be moving into that environment. And once they hit that really strong wind shear, they are going to be producing tornadoes as that moves inland. And that threat on Thursday stretches way inland. Thursday morning, we can start to go a little bit further north up into Mississippi. That's where that threat pushes. And during the day on Thursday, that threat is going to lift all the way up to the Memphis area. You can see it brings that belt of very strong wind shear, maximized over the front right quadrant. And I think that there could even be a tornado threat into portions of Alabama with this, as that convection lifts off to the north. This is the 60-hour, 3-kilometer NAM convective allowing model once it's over land. I need a dot right in the middle. And look at these supercells that come into southern Alabama, folks. These right here could mean business all the way up pretty tight to that center of circulation and removed a little bit off to the southeast. Wow. So I do think that there is going to be some tornado potential with that. Right in that zone. Look at how cellular these are. And you can tell that the instability is going to be a lot greater down over this portion, but the center of the storm is lifting up right along the Mississippi River. It's a little bit further west, west central Mississippi. So this might be in the southeastern quadrant. You might start losing some of the wind shear down there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Pensacola, Mobile area, even you guys are going to be getting those supercells lined up, coming on shore one after another. Let's take a look and see how that wind shear looks. We can click on that portion of the map right where those supercells are coming in. Let's actually look just north of Pensacola here and look at that photograph. So yeah, wind shear is going to be more than sufficient for tornadoes, even down into southern Alabama, Florida Panhandle. This is a major hook-shaped photograph. Captain Hook right there. Look at that directional shear in the lowest levels, lowest 2 to 3 kilometers. A lot of surface-based instability down there, 75 over 74. And your 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector is greater than 30 knots. So really, if you have greater than like 15 to 20 knots, you can realize tornado potential. But that's your surface wind due easterly at like 20 knots. Just above the ground, you got a southeasterly ripper up near 40 knots. The difference between those two vectors right there, that's your shear vector near 30 knots in the 0 to 1 kilometer sense. And that looks very favorable for tropical cyclone-induced tornadoes, due southerly 2-kilometer wind. Tons of directional shear. Surface wind easterly, 1 kilometer wind southeasterly, 2-kilometer wind due south. And then you've got these southwesterly winds aloft. And that's because of that approaching trough where you get some stronger southwesterly winds in the 4, 5, 6-kilometer layer. And that's why I think that tornado threat is going to be pretty significant with Francine as it lifts inland. Watch out. And all the way up into east central Mississippi, Tupelo could have some big problems up there. And that tornado threat eventually goes inland toward Memphis during the afternoon hours on Thursday. But this thing's going to be accelerating too, so it's going to be hard to keep up with that convective band. Even the regular NAM is starting to hint at some more vigorous convection over southern Alabama. But here's the official National Hurricane Center cone for Francine, 992 millibar surface pressure. So it has intensified just a little bit. This is the 10 p.m. advisory, Central Time. And they still have it over the western edge of Vermilion Bay. Let me see how my tools are working there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully this mic is even working. So here are the hurricane warnings, and they still include the Sabine River Valley, and that's because of Wednesday morning, that hurricane passing just offshore here. You're probably going to get some more vigorous conditions, and if this does end up heading a little bit further west, that's why you have those hurricane warning areas. Tropical storm watch throughout the Texas coastline, all the way up, including Houston, and you've also got a tropical storm watch over the eastern edge there, Louisiana, including Lake Pontchartrain, New Orleans. You've got a tropical storm warning all the way out through Grand Isle. Wouldn't be surprised if those are upgraded if an eastward trend becomes more evident. That's why those hurricane watches are kept. in that location. And look here, by Thursday, that's up near Memphis. So I've already got a stilt home reserve down there, but that red area, that's the hurricane warning. And we have tropical storm warnings down here, including Brownsville, northeastern Mexico, down into Brownsville. You got tropical storm warnings, Port Lavaca as well. The maximum sustained winds have been upgraded to 65 miles an hour as well. And that's likely from the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, starting to sample some of those stronger winds. Let's see what the latest Hurricane Center cone now has, too. "100 miles an hour still at landfall, 36 hours. So that has been kept the same. There's the 100-mile-per-hour landfall. Let's take a look at satellite and monitor that latest convective burst once again. Let me center that up in the screen. It's that convective burst that we think could be a sign of some more intensification happening tonight. We had one earlier this evening, and now it looks like we're starting to get some more vigorous convection right near the heart of that. Pull up my pink color. And even though we call these hot towers, they have cold tops still, but relative to like a supercell storm in the mid-latitudes, they're hot towers because of latent heat release. So when you get those that big convection near the center, leads to surface pressure falls. Due to latent heat release, that leads to more low-level convergence, more vigorous convection, more latent heat release, and those are the positive feedbacks that you deal with in the atmosphere that lead to tropical cyclone formation. You definitely do have a lot of dry air that's coming in off northern Mexico, and that is trying to prevent a little organization, but you can see a lot of the banding structure happening here, and I think that convection near the center and even this convection is getting more vigorous on approach to the tropical storm warning area. It looks to me like it is definitely starting to gain strength, and that's confirmed by the 65-mile-an-hour maximum sustained wind. And right now, the strongest winds are kind of right where that clear air is located in the northeastern quadrant of the inner core. But I think that once it wraps around that convection, you're going to see once it starts to wrap around that convection around the inner core, I think you're going to see a hurricane probably in the next advisory or two. Look at this blob up here. I think that was that original disturbance ahead of the system. And this is still stationary, meandering a little to the northwest, but eventually it's going to resume that northeasterly storm motion. I can show you this upper level trough coming in. Part of the steering mechanism. Oh, let's go national. We'll go the national view. And we do have the 0Z GFS that's coming in, but we're going to have to use the 18Z. Let's see how it initializes it. Down 996 down there. Thanks, everybody, for highlighting this live update. Little nightcap here as the models are coming out. And this is for Monday tonight, right now. But watch this little subtle trough. It's almost like a subtropical jet down here. There's that little ripple over southern New Mexico. Not a lot of flow with it, so the models don't handle these very good. But then over 12 hours, notice how it seems to deepen, and you actually get an acceleration of the winds downstream. And I think it's the right entrance region of the jet that could create some ventilation downstream. These wind barbs try to wrap around the high off to the south. These try to bend off to the north, and that creates a little pocket of ventilation. There you can see the tropical cyclone down here. Notice how it's interacting with the right entrance region of the jet. This is a jet streak right there. See if this is still working. This is the jet streak, so the entrance region of the jet, the right entrance region, is right about there. And usually the right entrance region of the jet is associated with lift. No, let me move that back over here. There we go. That's accurate. So this is the region that I'm watching, that right entrance region of the jet. This is the jet streak right here. You have a high pressure down in the Gulf of Mexico. That's why you have this anticyclonic flow down there. And then you have a trough coming through Mexico, or coming through Texas. And that's going to interact with that system. You basically get ventilation right in between those two. But that's also what's steering it in off to the northeast, heading towards south central Louisiana. Gizmo's back. And there you can see the 18Z GFS. That just takes it right up into south central Louisiana, into Vermilion Bay. But really kind of the balance between that trough coming through Texas and that high pressure off to the southeast of the system, kind of the balance will determine whether it heads a little bit further west or if it trends a little further east toward Grand Isle or heads right up the slot up into Vermilion Bay. What do you guys think? Eastward shift? That's Vermilion Bay. That's that point that we have a shelter located. So it is difficult to chase these hurricanes. You have to deal with a lot of drama. It's different than tornadoes. And they're not as compact of a system, so it's not as much of a finesse game. It's moving a little bit slower. Everybody knows where it's going. That gives a lot of opportunity for the media to get into position. You get everybody just centered right along the coastline. Police trying to keep you out from the zones to intercept. We can also look at the precipitation, folks. Total QPF here. And look at the flooding. We've got near double-digit rainfall now coming right up through Cyclamort Point, up through Baton Rouge, 8 inches. So that could lead to some flooding, especially since there's already been a lot of rainfall across this region with that stalled out front. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is some significant flooding from this, as there always is during these hurricanes. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm popping over just to make sure that my mic is working. Thanks, new Team Dominator members. Yeah, I think what happened earlier is my mic wasn't working, so I was getting throttled on these lives. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Please share this. These are the tropical storm force winds that are now coming on shore on the warning area in blue. Brownsville, across northeastern Mexico. Probably pretty dangerous to cross south here, but I would do it. I'd have no problem doing that. But right now you kind of have shore parallel flow. It looks like it's going to meander awfully close to Brownsville and then make that beeline toward Vermilion Bay. I did notice on the GFS that some of those tracks a little further east were stronger. So you got to wonder if a stronger storm will feel the southwesterlies ahead of that trough a little earlier and might bend it off to the northeast. And that's why I'm leaning toward hedging a little bit east on this, to be honest, toward the eastern edge of Vermilion Bay to intercept. But there you can see the hurricane warning area in red. And it includes the Sabine River area of Texas. Some of the worst bugs that I've ever seen in my entire life were up there in the Sabine River Valley. Got lit up by round after round of bugs, no-see-ums, cattle flies, mosquitoes. I was putting Windex on my legs to try to keep the bugs from getting off. But boy, it made it worse. I think they were actually attracted to the Windex, and then my skin started lighting up. And we were in an Airbnb with no air conditioning, 105 in there, windows open, bugs just hammering us. A dead sow was rotting in the front yard of that Airbnb, and that was just after chasing Hurricane Laura. And they just downed that tower in Lake Charles, I saw. So they imploded that tower, but that was the one where you had all the glass raining down. I think even a storm chaser almost bled out there in Lake Charles. I ended up abandoning everybody at the Wendy's. But you're going to have like a 5 to 10 foot storm surge right around Vermilion Bay. And notice the hurricane watch zone in pink. Don't forget that. That goes all the way down to near Port Fourchon. Past that, here's Venice right at the tip. Some of our friends out there, we wrote out Hurricane Zeta on the tip out near Venice. A lot of history between Team Dominator and Louisiana now, and that's unfortunate because that is because of all those hurricane landfalls that happened during the 2020 season. You've also got these tropical storm warnings just in the coastal areas of Houston, Galveston Island, and that's as this thing passes just offshore. Anytime you get any onshore flow out there, Boulevard Peninsula is likely going to be underwater with a big storm surge out there, so keep that in mind. But those are your watches and warnings. Got to be kidding me with that. Going back to satellite to monitor this intensification trend, 65-mile-an-hour winds. Oh, yeah, starting to get some towers there, starting to form even more. So a lot of times here at night, when you even get a more dramatic difference between the sea surface temperatures and the atmosphere aloft that's cooling, you usually get this uptick in convection that happens overnight. And look at that. This is the next intensification trend that we're watching, playing out here on satellite. Trying this new annotation tool called EpiCpen. So it looks like you can even barely see it. Let me make it a little bit bigger. But look at how it's kind of unzipping. It's propagating west, almost propagating up shear. See some of those towers there? It's almost unzipping east to west, propagating a little bit. But you definitely have moisture that's wrapping around the west side of the circulation. Maybe that's kind of running interference on some of the dry air into the circulation. But a lot of times when these things just get going, they'll look like this. The intensification process isn't just a solid pipe all the way through. Get a little bit of dry air that'll wrap in, but it's definitely spinning a lot stronger. You can definitely see the spin here on satellite imagery. This blob up in front is probably leading to some pressure falls, and that's kind of going to telegraph the path here of the tropical cyclone. Usually they'll want to follow where those pressure falls are happening out ahead of it, and you get a lot of this predecessor precipitation. I wonder if that's going to come ashore in the Gulf Coast region at all. Let's look at water vapor too and see where some of that dry air is located. Dry air and wind shear could certainly do a number on this one. I don't see a ton. I mean, that's not like overwhelmingly dry air. This is just kind of a organizing tropical cyclone here. Definitely have a lot of convection here on the southern side of it. This is that plume off to the northeast. You're looking at water vapor. You definitely have kind of invasion of that tropical air mass onto the land in the tropical warning area, which does include the Brownsville zone. A lot of banding, and in general, just look at the cyclonic spin. And you got some ventilation aloft. Outflow getting going. See how you have the cyclonic or the anticyclonic outflow as well? I bet this is going to be a hurricane when we wake up tomorrow morning. Take your pictures from here and be done with it. Oh boy, look at those strong winds. Well, we probably have that upgrade here. Look at these strong winds in that northwestern quadrant. You got to be kidding me with that. Flight level winds 64 to 83 knots. Right there, actually. Need to move this in unison. There it is. So zooming in a little bit more closely. Look at that. Pretty strong winds just sampled here. Hence the increase up to 65 knots, maximum sustained winds. Still at 992 central pressure, but those are some of the strongest winds we've seen yet so far, sampled by Hurricane Reconnaissance aircraft. and it's feeding into that convective burst, almost like an inflow jet, feeding into that new convective burst over the southwestern quadrant. So things are definitely happening fast here. You're looking at real-time observations from Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. We're looking at tropicaltidbits.com right now. I am going to be chasing this, of course. I'm at Team Dominator headquarters right now, but I'm going to be blasting down with Edgar, meeting up with Jordan as well. And boy, look at that. I'm just excited to use this new Epic pen. Oceanic heat content is quite high. Sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, some of the highest oceanic heat content anywhere is located in the Western Gulf. 31 degrees C up in the Bay of Campeche. Looks like a little bit less, but I mean, you're just above, near basically 30 degrees Celsius throughout the whole basin. Yeah, 31, 32. Satellite drive. You got cloud cover over the Western Gulf of Mexico. Oh, yeah, there's a better look at it. 31, 32 degrees C there. So definitely intensifying, and that's going to continue to happen. Anything greater than 27 degrees Celsius, and you're looking at an intensification trend. Usually. But of course, it does depend on a lot of things. Let me make sure that's square. That North Pacific Oscillation is probably not, so I want to make sure that's lined up for you. But yeah, look at that North Pacific Oscillation up there. I'm a big fan of this because I think that's the key to getting these active tornado seasons. All that warm water here in the northern Pacific, see that blob? That's anomalously warm water, and we've had it there for the last 2 years. That's why we've had active tornado seasons the last couple of years, and I think that blob is going to persist into 2025, and with this emerging La Nina that you're getting down in the tropical Pacific Ocean, I think that it's going to lead to an active tornado season in Dixie Alley. So I think that Dixie Alley is going to be active in 2025, but similar to 2011, where you had this warm North Pacific Oscillation, you had the negative anomalies with La Nina coming out in the tropical Pacific. You got remnants here of a warm PDO horseshoe from previous El Nino events. But I think that North Pacific Oscillation up here, this blob in the North Pacific, I think that's responsible for active tornado seasons below normal hurricane seasons. It displaces the jet north in the Pacific, south over North America, and I think that it leads to active summertime tornadoes too. That's why I think I got that tornado up in the Dakotas just like last week. Look at this warm water in the Atlantic Basin, and it's not as simple as warm water means active hurricane seasons, because usually when you get this warm water, it means that you have relatively cloud-free skies, anomalously cloud-free, more sun getting down, heating up the ocean surface, and an environment that's not very good for clouds is not conducive for hurricane development either. But even during these below normal seasons like we're seeing, it only takes one hurricane, and Francine's going to cause major problems here moving up the western Gulf of Mexico. Normal conditions, normal sea surface temperatures here in the Gulf of Mexico are very conducive this time of year for tropical cyclones to continue. But you also have to look at the upper atmosphere too. And if the upper atmosphere is warmer than the anomalies at the surface, then you're going to have a more convectively stable atmosphere. But this is what I studied in grad school at the University of Oklahoma, are these sea surface temperature patterns. They actually punished me for storm chasing too much. But I flipped it around to my advantage, and I use it to forecast active seasons or not. So active tornado seasons, hurricane seasons as well. So here is the 10 p.m. discussion, which we can read for you here. National Hurricane Center discussion. After strengthening this afternoon, Francine's intensity appears to have leveled off for now, but around 18Z It developed a closed low-level eye wall and a relatively symmetric cloud pattern. However, an intrusion of dry air has caused the inner core to degrade. They've been investigating Francine. Maximum sustained winds remain around 55 knots. Minimum pressure has dropped to 992, which could indicate that strengthening will resume again soon. Storm has been moving slowly north-northwest at about 4 knots, not moving very fast. They talk about the ridge over the southeastern Gulf. Environmental conditions are expected to remain quite favorable for strengthening along its path for the next 24 hours. Very warm ocean temperatures. Rapid intensification over the next 24 hours has decreased a little because of the dry air around Francine. But still, that's why they haven't ramped it up even more, keeping it at 100 miles an hour, some of that dry air that might be in the path of it. But I bet it's just kind of waning down a little bit, and I bet that it'll likely reinvigorate. I think that the 0Z GFS is starting to pump in. It is. So let's see what the 0Z GFS says, folks. Hot off the press. Looking at the rainfall, it does look like a stronger system. We got 14 inches of rain just inland from Vermilion Bay. So a little bit more rainfall right there probably means a stronger system. So let's see what it looks like now. This is hot off the press, folks. You are looking at the GFS. The new 0Z GFS is coming in. 975 millibar. Hopefully you can see it on the bottom edge of the screen. Just saying peekaboo for you there. That's Wednesday at 9Z. We're looking at Wednesday morning. Slide the Epic Pen up just a little. That's at 4 a.m. Wednesday morning. We're going to step forward to, oh yeah, it's really starting to feel that ventilation, I think, in the northern Gulf of Mexico. 973, 975. So it starts to, oh, yep. Kind of levels off, but tries to intensify there right at the end. And it heads in right over the eastern edge of Vermilion Bay. Look at these easterlies just pumping into Lake Pontchartrain. That'll fill that up, and you'll have coastal flooding all around the periphery of Lake Pontchartrain. You'll have flooding all along the southern coastline here, too. Anywhere you get that onshore flow, you're going to have big problems. The most dangerous portion of a hurricane is right on the eastern edge of the eye wall, or the eastern side of the eye wall, so right here. You could be on this western edge and have like 150 mile an hour offshore flow, and at least you won't have that tsunami-like wall of water that comes in. And so it is possible to kind of cover this storm surge if you're heading west to east right along the coastline, offshore flow, hit the center, start to see surge, and then bang, you hit that wall right on the eastern side of that hurricane, and that's where you get the tsunami-like wall of water right here. Right as that comes inland, right when you get that surge of that onshore flow that's perpendicular to the coastline, that's when you get that 10 to 15 foot wall of water that comes in, life-threatening storm surge all along that southeastern coastline. All this marshland down there, and you do have that levee system that protects the very southern portion of Louisiana, and that's where you have the mandatory evacuations so far. So the 0Z GFS, let me show you the trend here. I want to zoom in. That's 0Z, this is 18Z. Boy, very close. Pretty much no change between 18Z and 0Z. Maybe a little bit faster 0Z compared to 18Z. That's 21Z on Wednesday, 4 p.m. Wednesday. Yeah, a little, just a hair faster, but really almost a very similar line. With that upper level trough and the high pressure over the southeastern Gulf, at least that's relatively predictable. The path of it is quite predictable. So let's making sure I'm still live here. Hoping my mic is still working. Is the mic still working, everybody? Hello? Yeah, that chat is just ripping right now. Vermilion Bay is definitely going to be the target. Let's look a little bit closer at some map action here. Yeah. Give me some satellite here, folks. There we go. You're looking at Pecan Island. Pecan. There's Vermilion Bay. Circled it perfectly. Definitely getting used to these tools. So there's Vermilion Bay, Marsh Island. We should be getting out there on Marsh Island and try to work that. It'd be very dangerous. Here is Cypremort Point. Right here, right in the tip. You basically have this little tip of land that comes out there. This is heart of Vermilion Bay. The surge is going to come right over this, Marsh Island. These southeasterlies are going to come in. A 5 to 10 foot wall of water is going to come in. And was able to, there are some stilt homes out there. I think it's a mandatory evacuated zone. But the problem is that if the system comes in over the eastern edge of Vermilion Bay, then that would bring the more dangerous portion of the storm up near the Atchafalaya Delta Management Refuge. So that would bring that dangerous surge into this area, out in the boonies. And then we'd have to get up near Centerville, up near Franklin area, and then work the I-90 corridor. That's really the closest that you can get to work that onshore flow. But we might be able to start in Cypremort Point and then head back up as we're going live and then back down toward Franklin, Centerville, Avalon. And then here's Morgan City, too. A lot of our buddies that are shooting swamp people are out there. They're asking if there are any evacuation warnings or anything. And definitely are below the levee area. And I think that they're going to expand those north, too. These are all stilt homes down here and survived Hurricane Zeta at least, but this area right at the tip here would be underwater, so you'd probably have to stash a vehicle inland on Highway 90, maybe be deposited out here to dominate that portion of the storm. Boy, this is going to be underwater out there, folks. And sometimes if you try to get aggressive and cover the surge like out here, and then you're trying to retreat because the system might miss you, then this will all be underwater. This one road in and out would also be underwater. A lot of times the fire departments are located near the higher elevation areas. But this marshland that is along the southern coastline of Louisiana here protects the areas up near the I-10 corridor a bit. But remember Hurricane Laura that came right in, bringing that centroid right into Lake Charles. A lot of that damage was all the way inland. So many times those marshlands are also underwater and they don't provide a lot of friction or anything. So there's nothing to slow down the wind. Just rips right over these marshlands, and there's just nothing to slow it down. But these can act to protect the coastline a little bit. We rode out Hurricane Zeta right at the tip down here, right at the Venice Marina. And they were telling us crazy stories of from Hurricane Katrina, of like tankers floating by, oil tankers, just dominated by like a 20-foot wall of water down here. And there's a marina that is on stilts too. And some people decided to ride out Katrina, and it was like a Category 5 when the eye wall was down here, right at the tip down near Venice. And they were reporting these massive barges floating by, just horrific reports, firsthand reports down there when Katrina came in. Amazing fishing I hear down here right at the tip. We deployed a storm surge probe right here, Burras, during Hurricane Zeta. Is that Burras? Terrebonne Parish. Port Sulphur is a decent sized town, but we had a huge surge during Zeta from the northeasterlies right off the east side of that bay, like a 7-8 foot storm surge that came in. Pretty crazy data set from that Category 3 hurricane that came in here during November. Pretty late season hurricane. But at least with this eastward trend, that's good news for our folks out on Lake Charles, but a lot can change. We tried to ride it out down near Cameron, but it just would have been very dangerous down near Holly Beach through Cameron, out near Creole. All had like 145 mile an hour winds during Hurricane Laura. We saw some water lines down there at, I think, Cameron High School. And a lot of times the storm surge will want to rip up these canals when you get that onshore flow. So areas like Hackberry had big storm surge as well. We rode it out in downtown Lake Charles, kind of like an urban intercept. Up in Lake Charles, and saw like whole cell phone towers that were coming down. It was a Category 4 hurricane coming right into Lake Charles there. We can look at the 18Z GFS ensemble, look at some of the spread of the individual. Oh, the 0Z is starting to come in, actually. Breaking news. There it is. Boy, good agreement here. You got a couple that are taking a further west track, but most of them look like they're clustered right toward the eastern side of Vermilion Bay. But you still have a couple a little further west. But that takes it right into the boondocks there, Vermilion Bay. Sycamore Point might be kind of in the offshore flow side of that tropical cyclone. But this is the GFS ensemble showing each minimum pressure of each member of the ensemble, each GFS member. Gizmo? Giz! And boy, I can't stress enough the tornado potential as this moves inland into southern Mississippi and Alabama. They're both going to have issues with that tornado potential. Let's see what the some of these energy helicity index parameters are for this. This is Wednesday night, showing a pretty favorable environment southern Mississippi in terms of instability and wind shear. Look at that, Wednesday evening. Let's see, Wednesday right about landfall. That's it over southeastern Louisiana. That's the very favorable zone Wednesday afternoon for tornado potential. Look at that right there. This is 0 to 3 kilometer energy helicity index. That shows you where your instability is co-located with 0 to 3 kilometer wind shear. And it definitely shows a favorable tornadic environment as that thing comes ashore Wednesday afternoon. So this is Wednesday at 4 p.m. Look at that bright dot of EHI right near the New Orleans area, Hammond, Covington. Oh yeah. So this photograph right here is textbook for tornado production for tropical cyclones. You have a lot of the winds here in the east, or out of the easterly direction, starting to get some southwesterlies though aloft as that upper trough is starting to arrive. You can see these in this portion of the sounding. Those are the southwesterlies at the upper troposphere. But you basically have an east-southeasterly surface wind at 30 knots. Just above that, you have a southeasterly wind ripping at 60 knots. And you go all the way up to near due south, up at 4 and 5 and 6 kilometers. That change in direction and speed creates a lot of wind shear. And you've got like a 30 knot 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector right there. You take the difference in the vectors between your surface wind and your 1 kilometer wind, subtract those, and that's your vector right there, about 30 knots. So storm motion, almost south to north, a little bit of a westward movement at 50. Right mover might be a little bit right of that, but north-northwest movers, and then your hodograph wrapping all the way around. And the area enclosed by your storm motion vector and the hodograph curve is proportional to your low-level wind shear. So definitely looks like high-end tornado potential over southeastern Louisiana as this thing comes in. And the NAM model shows that 0 to 3 EHI even better over coastal areas at 0Z, and it comes inland over southeastern Louisiana, all picking up on this tornado potential through Wednesday evening, and then eventually that's going to also push inland into Mississippi, I think, overnight. Even southern Alabama, Pensacola, look out Thursday morning. Got to be kidding me with that. Look at that coastal front coming ashore still with a lot of wind shear right there. Pensacola, Mobile, coastal Alabama, look out. Wow. We're going to look at a forecast hodograph out of Pensacola Thursday morning at 7 a.m. And there's a hodograph for you, folks. Look at that curvature. And you're going to have a southerly mover at 30 knots, a little bit slower, a lot more manageable. But look at that frickin' curvature right there. Got to be kidding me with that. Oh. Your 1 kilometer wind right there. Southeast at like 60 knots. Your surface wind pretty close to southeast at about 20 knots. And the difference between those vectors is like 40 knots of shear. And you also have a lot more directional shear. Look at these southwesterly, mid, and upper tropospheric winds. And you even get your arrival of the elevated mix layer. That's your dry slot in the mid and upper troposphere that's starting to wrap in. So right now we are tracking the tornado potential too with Tropical Storm Francine. And it looks like Wednesday night that tornado threat's really going to start ripping near Biloxi, Gulfport area. Could get it. A little bit to the east of New Orleans. Mobile could get that tornado threat as that comes ashore. Hell, even out near Apalachicola could get some pretty robust tornado potential as well. So there you have it, everybody. It's about as comprehensive of a live update as I can give on this thing. Thanks for tuning in to this update. We've been live for over an hour. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to this update. Tornado potential is going to be legitimate. Hurricane Hunter is just swinging around the west side, sampling some of that convection that's about to come ashore near Mexico. Look at some of those tropical storm force winds out there. That's all with that convective plume. And it looks like our convection, even just since we got on here, is starting to tick back up again, isn't it? I think we're starting to resume our intensification trend. Oh, yeah. Hell, it looks like it's even drifting a little bit further west. You got to wonder how that's going to affect that eastward trend. I bet as this thing waits and then the upper trough's going to come out of Texas, that'll cause that eastward trend. So by it slowing down a little bit, and look at that tower down over the southern edge of the circulation. Just blossoming down there. And they're called hot towers, but they really have cold cloud tops, but you can see that they're penetrating pretty high up into the troposphere. They're called hot towers because they have latent heat release. That's what leads to the surface pressure falls. And you do have a little bit of dry air wrapping in. That's why some of the rapid intensification parameters have come down just a little bit. But we're going to be heading down there tomorrow to cover this storm. Live storm chase mode. Be sure to hit that notification bell. Thanks everybody for tuning in to this nightcap here as we are watching Francine.